right, welcome back to the podcast. Today it's just Kate and I, and we are going to be talking a little bit about somatic healing. So this is a subject that, Kate is very passionate about and has her clients working with a number of different practitioners and different kind of modalities that they're working through this. And she's even got a trip coming up next week where she's going to dive a little bit deeper into it, and it's something I've dove into a little bit as well, to just help with healing and not just physical but emotional ways, and it's all kind of tied together. And I think with our CrossFit population, I guess just the population in general, I think we oftentimes tackle maybe symptoms. It's sort of like the American way of like treating things, like, oh, my ankle hurts, I want to fix my ankle. I'm not feeling well, I need to get my blood work done. All of these things are Western medicine, and it's necessary oftentimes to prevent heart attacks or big things. But if you keep having a bunch of things kind of pop up, being able to look at yourself holistically and then, fixing yourself from the inside out really will help, I think, mitigate a lot of these issues. So, I'd love to have you just kind of dive into it, because you're a lot more knowledgeable on these than I am, and have been practicing a lot of this stuff for years and have kind of turned me on to it, and can kind of put in my 2 cents as more of a beginner, and you can kind of explain to people what this is that you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I guess I just want to kind of rewind a little bit and where I think I started to really become passionate about it. And I think it was during the time that I had my eye surgeries. And not necessarily that the issue with my eye was like the real issue, but just the fact that my body wasn't taking the surgery well. And so to just kind of explain a little, I'm going to dive into it just a little bit further so you understand. So both my retinas were detached. One they could fix with a laser, one I had to have surgery on. And after the first surgery, basically I formed a lot of scar tissue. My body created this super inflammatory response, and it redetached that retina. So that happened 2 more times after that. So I had 4 surgeries total, and it kept reoccurring. And, we've talked a little bit about this on the podcast, but my surgeon had never seen this happen. He had been practicing for 15 years. And so he started to have me tested for cancer, for autoimmune diseases, for all these other issues, and rightfully so. He's like, there's something else going on. And so, Brandon actually started having me meditate and having me try to work through these other kind of modalities, like connecting my mind to the pain, because it was very painful. And I was in a lot of pain where I had an epidural given to me on right below my eye, and it just numbed the left side of my head. And I went back the next night to get it again, and my surgeon's like, no, we can't do this. This is so dangerous to do. This is kind of like a one-time thing. If I keep doing this, I can't remember the risk, but it was it might be fatal. So obviously there's something else going on within my body. And so I had really started to try to take my mind to try to figure out what that was and kind of connect what's going on, because all the tests came back clear. And finally, during one doctor visit that I had, he walked in and he had to give me the news. It was the last surgery, and it was just so disheartening. He said, hey, I'm sorry, your retina's detached again. And I just started bawling, and we're kind of talking about it. I'm like, I know why this is happening. I had this aha moment, and it was all stress. And during that time, our son had just turned 1, and things were pretty good here in our life. But, I'm adjusting to owning a business, having a son, And then I think there were talks of maybe trying to get pregnant again. And then my dad found my aunt dead. And what that was horrific is his little sister. But on top of that, it was like 2 days after this surgery. So I had to be face down for I think it was like a week, like 45 minutes out of every hour. So that meant if I went to calling hours, I had 15 minutes to go like pay respects. I couldn't be there for my dad. I couldn't be there for my family. And it was very, very upsetting to me. And I think
you still showed up.
Yeah, I still showed up, but I couldn't go to the funeral the next day. I really just wanted to spend time with my family. And so I think that big incident, and I try to make it okay in my mind, but I really think that is what kind of caused this like auto, like hyper response in my body. Now, once that starts to happen, I think your body forms kind of a pathway. Like that's the reaction. So I think it kept happening. So anyways, I really got interested in this type of healing and was just trying to learn about it and learn more, just even like how is my mind and stress involved in my body and what happens. And then, I work very closely with individuals, not just with nutrition, but their bodies and helping them try to find some sort of exercise regime that feels good for them and that they're not beating themselves up, something that they can sustain. So what I've started to notice over the years, there's so many common themes once you get into your 30s and 40s of your body not healing. And yes, age is a factor. Age, you're going to start to heal slower. But I really think the root of a lot of this inability to heal is more like the trauma that we have gets built up in our body. So it's not just like, yes, we're getting older. Yes, you're going to heal a little slower, but almost like you've got so much crap built up that like your body doesn't have any room, any energy left to heal itself. It's like if you were to come in and do a kick-ass workout when you're beat down, you cannot push that hard because your body's either going to have to heal the cold or whatever's going on in your body or help rebuild your muscle fibers. So I look at the body like that, like we're here's another analogy I use, like you're driving a car and you're like living out of your car and you're throwing your trash in the back seat and then it gets filled up and then you're throwing it in your passenger side and then all of a sudden it's like overflowing when you open the door. And to me, that's almost kind of like this midlife crisis, like around the age of 40, where I don't really think anyone escapes it. I don't think how wonderful your life has been, that your childhood, your friendships, your family, no matter what, every family has this function. No one's perfect themselves. So you have little guilts or those all get stuck in your body. So somatic healing just means body healing. So it's this idea that these traumas throughout your lifetime exist in your body on a cellular level. And to release those, you have to do some sort of practice. So it's really pretty, in my opinion, impossible to do it on your own. I don't know of anyone that has. These practitioners themselves try to get worked on. And I'll ask them about that because I'm always curious, like, how do they get help? Because you need help as, like, I have a standing appointment every other week with an intuitive healer that helps me release. She does kind of a combination of cranial sacral work in fascia work. And I really love this, like, fascia release.
Maybe explain what those are to people, because
and it's kind of hard to understand. So cranial sacral and fascia work, they're kind of one and the same. Cranial sacral just means to kind of work at your brain. She works all over my body, but fascia encases every muscle of our body. Fascia actually encases our organs. I didn't realize that. Fascia runs through our entire body. It's much larger than our skeletal system. So we will have little almost like adhesions, if you can kind of think about it, in our fascia all throughout our body. And these can be from working out, they can be from injury, they can be from emotions. So what she does, I mean, it's a light touch and it's a talk therapy with it. So basically, she kind of starts by putting her hands on my feet, opening up some energy field, and okay, your back's coming up, or your throat. Kind of talk to me, and a lot of this is intuitive. So I have clients that go to see her. I just had a client last week, and she's like, "Oh man," she asked me this question, and I was blown away. Like, how does she know that? So it's an intuition, and she kind of like the body talks to her. And she'll kind of ask a question or kind of get an intuition to ask about a certain area of your body or your life, or like, hey, talk to me about your kids. And then she helps me kind of pull out what truly is the issue. So what I find, people sit in my office and they want to talk to me about work and how, maybe their spouse is ticking them off, or this kind of current things that are upsetting them, and that matters. But the things that kind of matter more, if you're really going to get deep into it, it's more when we're forming our foundational thoughts about ourselves. So that's when your subconscious mind is open. So there's a particular age that you start forming those foundational thoughts, and that's from 3 to 8 years old. And so you are forming your thoughts about yourself and the world as your subconscious. Then, and it's not exactly like on your 8th birthday it closes. It's going to range for everyone. But after that, after that time, at some point, your subconscious mind kind of closes and like, okay, we've have our thoughts about the world, and then all of your experiences have to be filtered through your subconscious mind. So you're so young, you're just trying to understand the world. This is where all this healing really primarily takes space. So when I'm in there and I'm working with this woman, and again, that's just one way. I'll kind of talk about some other ways. Often what comes up for me is really early memories, really early, that I kind of wouldn't have known to go back to on my own, but are kind of like this core fears. So next week I'm going on a trip to Arizona. It's been one of my core fears to be alone, and I have felt like I needed to confront it for quite some time. Plus my team of healers have told me that too. So I'm flying into Phoenix. I'm renting a car on my own. I'm staying by myself in a hotel, and I'm doing this Sedona Soul Adventure. So it's kind of like a 3-day intensive, this inner child work and then processing. And there will be body work involved in that. So like massage and Reiki. Reiki is another form. It's energy healing. In traditional Reiki, they don't touch you. But I've experienced forms where they do like a light touch. I feel like it's a little more effective. And that's more like clearing of chakras, if anyone's familiar with chakras. And they're just energy systems within our body. And kind of along the line of when you go to get adjusted by a chiropractor, if your spine is aligned, you can function better. If your chakras are aligned, you can function better emotionally, more like. So you might not have outbursts as much, or kind of strange reactions that don't match what's going on in your life. Another recent work type of somatic healing that I've done is breath work, and it's with one of our members, Anna Rice, and it's really amazing, like her experience, and we want to have her on.
That's become a big thing that's trended in the CrossFit community as well, is the breath work, and how helpful that can be to moving energy, also just like calming your nervous system down when you're because a lot of times what happens to us is when we're doing these really tough, intense workouts, particularly at that level 2 sort of level of training, but we get it in the all levels as well, but we're going to rev everything up. You're going to be all jacked up, and to regulate your nervous system, to bring that back to a nice neutral spot and calm it down. So now you're in a healing state, and your body is in a spot where now it can rest, it can heal, it can sleep, because that can even throw people off where, like, if you do a really hard workout, at 6:30 at night and, it's really intense, your heart rate gets spiked up and you're having trouble getting your nervous system to calm back down, those breathwork practices. I know across the board, Ben Bergeron talks about that a lot. So,
and that's something you can do on your own. And I believe in a daily, like Brandon and I both meditate every day. And I think that is super important. Or breath, if you have a smaller amount of time, like a 5-minute breath work session is great. And I really encourage all my clients to have a daily practice on their own. The problem is, even like when I'm doing that session with her, and Brandon, you experienced this too, I've never been able to have an experience like that. It was
with Anna, how she did that,
40 to 45-minute session where, I'm having openings throughout my body, emotions coming up. You felt you had releases, and that's somatic healing, and that's very difficult to get to on your own. Just having the guidance of someone to guide you through it. But one of the largest components of this is talk therapy through it. So I feel that that's very important and something that's uncomfortable. So people are just like, I had this in my body. My knee was holding all this stress. Well, there's emotions there, and it's hard to get to those. It's almost like it's not going to be on the forefront of your mind. You really need to kind of try to tap into that subconscious mind. So that's what you're doing, like during meditation, during this somatic healing. You're trying to relax enough to get to the point where you have what waves is it? Is it like the theta waves or like the deep sleep where you can get to where your mind's almost like in this dream-like state where your mind can kind of take you to what it needs to heal. And what's really neat about this is for me, it's never what I think it is. It's kind of give yourself more grace, give yourself more love. Don't you need to work harder and do and maybe I need to have more discipline in some areas, but it's more, coming from a loving standpoint. So why I feel this is so important and why it really matters and getting down to like the nitty gritty. I am working with client after client whose body is not healing from something and has put them out on the sidelines. And hey, maybe that's what it takes. Maybe it takes getting to midlife. I don't know a lot of 20-year-olds that'd be willing to do like the somatic healing and breath work, but maybe so if they're really processing something very heavy, very hard, or a loss of a loved one. You have to wait till you're ready, but the inability to heal, that is part of our ability to heal is foundational to our health. I mean, if you cannot heal, that's when you start to literally like die. Not to be dramatic, but I mean, you look at my grandfather's 99 and he's going into the hospital every other day for this toe that he had an injury 2 years ago and he can't heal. That's like the beginning of the end. And not that it is, if you have an elbow injury, but if you have a lingering injury, there's going to be an emotional attachment to that. And not just I'm mad that I'm hurt, like your body's talking to you. So, there was a book that came out, I saw just kind of reading up on it today, 4 years ago, The Body Keeps Score. And so Oprah's talked about it. It's been like the New York Times, like bestseller for the last 4 years. And that was really kind of like the intro into really got a lot of more notoriety about this type of healing. I believe almost everything that happens to our body is for a reason. Even kind of the things that seem like by accident. I had this weird incident a couple weeks ago where I was out to dinner with a friend and I was choking and it was really scary. And we've been talking about it because I kept telling her, I'm like, oh my gosh, I really feel like that was a sign. And I met, I had my intuitive healer this week and I did some angel cards with another sort of healer also where it both came up. Like in the card healer right away, she said, what's going on with your throat is coming up. And I think it's always symbolic, even in my eye. Like everything that happens, I think, is for a reason and ultimately for a higher good. It might just take something uncomfortable to have us listen. Where the choking incident, I think, was like, hey, you need to slow down. You need to like chew your food. You need to slow down in life and not always just push through doing what you always do. And it's tough in this industry because people want to see you show up. They want to see you do the workouts with them. They want to see you show up whether you feel good or you don't feel the best, or that's it. Like, you always show up. And I think showing up is good. It's just showing up and meeting your body where it's at is very important. And that's always hard for me to do. So another type is the emotion code, which, Brandon, you've done that sort of work. Can you explain a little how you, because we both had this done and then we had our son do it too, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, there's a documentary called Emotion on Netflix, I believe, that can explain it quite a bit better than I can. So the way it works is the person who's kind of administering it has different ways of, they'll ask questions and, they can like push down on your hand. And if it's like weak or strong in a certain way that they do it,
it's based off like kinesiology.
Yeah,
like
they can get answers for it. And then they can follow these like set of questions. 'Cause it's all, I don't know, there's like a science to it. And, I'm trying to think of how it gets to certain things. Like, okay, hey, did you...
They test different systems, and then... I'm
not going to do a real good job.
Well, no, I just kind of... Yeah.
People, so I don't know. I'm trying to get to the result of it and what kind of happens. They'll kind of dive into maybe even like life events, and they can get to them pretty quick actually through these. They'll ask you some questions, and then they will, what do they do to kind of resolve that or like?
So it's like a magnetic, like clearing.
Yeah.
So they're clearing like those emotions from you. So this one is a little more passive experience. If you have a hard time talking about like, okay, yes, when I was 14, you can, it's interesting because they'll give you different ages and they test different energy systems, different organs, and basically will pinpoint at 14, the emotion anger was entered into your body, and it's related to your friendships.
So yeah, they're going to help you process that stuff. And I mean, if I can, really distill down a lot of what Kate's saying, where I'll notice where I'm in a really good groove is when you're able to process some of these things, or, work with these different types of therapists and healers and kind of work from the inside out. What tends to happen is you will get less injuries, you get sick less often, you sleep better, you feel better. And generally, if you want to apply that to training and kind of, almost want to go back to where you're like, hey, if you're 20 years old, this might not be for something you want to dive into. I mean, I think it could be a huge performance enhancer for guys and girls who are, competing, because what I'll see oftentimes is they're running into like insomnia issues, nagging injuries, things that you're a little more durable and you have a little more time to kind of like deal with that. You will heal faster. You can grind through these things. But if you were able to process things that were bothering you rather than just stuffing them away, you're going to get rid of that, and you're going to sleep better. You're going to perform really optimally. And so when you can get all of this stuff, you feel good, you're happy, you're walking through the day feeling really well, you're not going to get hurt a lot. You're going to sleep better, and your training and your physical performance is going to be optimized. What I'll always notice is if I have a nagging injury or two, my whole system feels fairly shitty. I never usually have something like, I can't shake a knee tendonitis for 2 months if I feel really good everywhere else. That is almost never the case, if at all. If I have something like that that's going on, I'm kind of not feeling great in general as that is happening.
That's a really good point for people to like pay attention to. Like, you know, if it's a foot injury or a hand injury or an elbow injury, like what else is going, like even just to start to be aware.
If you're not healing from
are
something.
Are you able to sleep?
Yep.
But and this is what I meant. I absolutely agree with you. I'm just thinking of me at 20. I was so stubborn. But this sort of healing hadn't really come along. And I don't know if I would be willing to look at things in my life or my past and talk about it. I mean, I remember I always cite this session I had with a therapist when Brandon and I were getting married, and this guy wanted me to talk about like my childhood and things that were uncomfortable with me with my mom. And I'm like, dude, do you pull up all of your shit? And I like confronted him, and he's like, no, hey, fair, because he was going in on me, but he had an intuition. That was the only way he had an intuition. And he was right. I just wasn't ready to talk about it, or I didn't see the relevance in bringing it up. And it's uncomfortable, but if it's not uncomfortable, it's almost like a workout. Like if you go in there and you're pushing comfortable weights, you're not going to get stronger. If you go to run 6 400s every week and you're not out of breath, you're not going to get faster. It's kind of like that with this work. You've got to work at it, and where you're like, okay, cool, I feel happy, I feel peaceful, but I understand why, because I've been working my ass off to feel this. I've been working my ass off to feel comfortable in my own skin and not drugged down by this. But this is a whole nother world. This has just really got me excited about health in general in probably the past 4 or 5 years, where we kind of began our journey like over COVID together, where we just were not in a good spot mentally. And I'm like, we always work on our physical health. Let's start to work on our mental health. And we kind of dove into it. Brandon came like kicking and screaming, but he did too. And then it's neat. It's like a whole different world, because it's everything we think and feel, but it's not necessarily like you can hold it in your hands. Mm-hmm. So it's
more nuanced, you know. It's certainly more nuanced. It's a little trickier than to say, I'm going to put the voodoo floss on your leg, and we're going to go through this, and then, your leg's going to feel better. Because it's not as black and white as that, and it's not as like this cause is direct into that. What I will always ask people though, and this is where I can get their attention, when I'm kind of recommending this, I'll have someone who, they're chronically getting hurt, and they just seem like they're vibrating kind of like down here a little bit, and I really feel for them, because I've been in that spot and I felt that way, and I'll talk to them and I'll say, hey, were you ever taking injuries, illnesses, having lack of sleep when you felt really good, you were really happy, like say like when you just got a new job, or you're dating someone who you're like totally in love with, or find that spot? And they're like, no, absolutely, like I was PRing every squat and like this and that in that time. And I said, okay, so what we have to do is start to work backwards and find that again and figure out what's got us here and how to start to climb out of that. And it can be a lot of things that aren't super related to, it could be people who are they're checking the box. They're getting into the gym.
On paper, they're doing everything.
Yeah, they're doing the things that they should, but they don't feel right in their own skin, for one reason or another. And then you have to kind of like work through that and find out what's going on. And I think as we age, as we get older, people start to run into a little bit more of that, because you've got more scars, you've got more time under your belt, where particularly as an adult, you really start to accumulate them, you know, from 0 to 20. If you had a you know, a nice childhood, you know, you're accumulating some things and stuff, but like you really start to build up after that. It starts to build up when you have another. And it can
be simple. I mean, anyone that has kids, I mean, really think about, like, I'm going to give an example. My daughter had a jiu-jitsu practice last night. And so afterwards I said, good job, but you really need to listen better. And she's like, does that mean I didn't do a good job? And I'm like, well, no, I just said good job, but you're not really listening very well. And so when I was giving her a bath, then later that night she said, and when she got really dramatic about it, she said, you said I didn't do well in jiu-jitsu. You wish I was never born. And I was like,
that's a 5-year-old.
Yeah. Well, and she related it to, because she said, you said I didn't do well in jiu-jitsu. And I said, no, I want you to have your listening ears on, because I know that's something they say in school a lot. And she said, I don't even have listening ears. You wish I was never born. So I think she's like literally thinking that she wasn't born with the right ears or something. But as silly as this is right now, that to her is everything. So she's not understanding. She's 5 years old. But in her mind, I can tell that that's going to bother her. And I probably need to talk about it again. But your mind just isn't formed. But you're forming these foundational thoughts. So it might seem silly to us. And some aren't so silly that I'm working through. Like they're deeper emotions where I feel like a sadness from my mom that affected me. And you know, there's a whole story that everything has a story, and to understand, you know, is very important. And people might think, oh, and I've talked to so many clients that like, hey, I have that boxed up real nice. I'm not opening that up. You don't have to, but you will always limit how happy you can be. You will always limit how good your body could feel, and you will always limit then your entire family, because that affects them. And it's not regurgitating that to live through over and over. It's to bring it back out, shed some light on it, whatever incident these are. And honestly, we don't always know. I feel like I need to just kind of get in there and see what comes up personally. But I know a lot of it. I know like the bigger things. And then there's like, you know, more nuanced sort of memories that happened that bother me that I didn't realize. But the whole purpose of this is to now see it with a better perspective, a wiser perspective. And we can have that even within our life, you know, something that happened 6 months ago where it was so upsetting, but to now, like when you're in it, it's so painful, you don't have perspective. Then give it some time and you can pull back, and at least it's usually involving someone else, understand where that person's coming from. Now I understand their pain a little bit more. I can have more perspective on, even if that wasn't fair to me, understand that person's pain and why they maybe acted in a certain way, or why they said the thing they did, or try to make us feel a certain way. And we all do that. We all are kind of hurting each other and loving each other all the time, whether it's your best friend or, you know, it's usually the people you're close to, but it all matters, you know. With our son, when we had him do the emotion code, it was kind of funny. Literally, almost everything he felt was from us. So they'll say, this is, you know, in this particular form of therapy, this emotion code, this practitioner, everyone has a little bit different take on this. I also have a woman that I use that she's based out of California, so it's all remote, and that's really cool too. And it's a little different. I get a more detailed report at the end, but she doesn't always have like the exact year that something landed. This one's neat because you can kind of take home the sheet and look at, wow, like, man, 19 was a rough year for me, or I'll have a couple years in there. I'm like, okay, yeah, that graduating college was a big one. And
what were you going to say about Oscar?
Life events. So with our son, you know, some of those are from us, our emotions, and some of those are from our parents. So when we took our son through it, almost every emotion that he had that wasn't so positive came from either you or I. And so he would be like, Mom, Dad, like this is anger, this is anxiety, this is from your mom, this is from your dad. And he had a couple on his own, but it just is really interesting to see how much that affects our kids too. And no matter what we do, no matter how hard we try, we're going to do that. But we have that from our parents. That doesn't just get washed away when you turn 18. That doesn't get washed away, when you almost have to go back and understand and meet yourself at that point and have that perspective and then clear it. So,
okay. So for people listening, like what are some of these modalities, what are some things that they can do to get the somatic healing? Like maybe some things they can do on their own, but that also like things they could look at to add to, a general wellness kind of regimen. If they're going to PT and they're eating healthy, they're training, and then, something doesn't feel optimized and, they've got blood work done or I don't know, it's like, okay, hey, something's just not sitting right. Like what should I do?
Well, that's a good question. And if you guys have questions, that's something I would love to help people with because it's kind of nuanced. There's no black or white.
Sure.
What I usually will tell, like when I'm working with a client, I kind of get into working with them and understand kind of what they're going through and then kind of feel out which practitioner they might vibe with best or which modality might work best for them. Like I went to see a woman that specializes like in female health and abdominal massage, and that all helps with hormonal balance and postpartum stuff and premenopause, perimenopause, full menopause. So I would like to help people out if you guys are interested and you kind of just even want to send me an email, let me know what's going on, or do a quick phone call with me. Other than that, we could put like some resources on our next newsletter.
Would you lump in like the kind of like the Mindbody educational reading and like the stuff that I've done with that, with that type of thing? So
yeah,
what I'm talking about here is it's a lot of education.
Learning, yeah.
So it's learning, and then when you're able to learn, you can have, and you do some journaling exercises with it.
Yeah.
There's different programs I've actually worked like it's like the athlete comeback. There's all these things where it involves education on sort of mind-body issues and then journaling about feelings, stuff that I really like was averse to doing, but it really did help when I was consistent with it. And
absolutely.
So that's a thing that I've done. You've got your Reiki.
So there's Reiki, there's emotion code therapy, there's breath work,
yep.
There's a craniosacral intuitive healing.
You'll see these services offered at a lot of spas too.
Yeah.
So these are things. These
They're
are
becoming much more mainstream.
Yeah, you see them at like hotels and spas, like on the menu of things to do.
Especially when you're going into different countries like South America or Mexico, they're really keen on this. It becomes almost like a.
Would you put like a sweat lodge as something that would be in there?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think all these practices. So what I would truly advise, if this is all new to you, I would advise to watch that documentary, Emotion. I would advise to just kind of start to read up on this, the Mindbody. Maybe we can put a link to that book that you.
Yeah, you've got Sarno's work, like the Mindbody prescription. There's a great book called Unlearn Your Pain. It's
also
like
the
a 30
body keeps score.
Yeah, the body keeps score. It's like all of these things that connect sort of your emotional health with your physical health.
Yep.
And what you're seeing too, and even from like our audience is pretty much 100% pure CrossFitters that go to this gym or are used to. What you're seeing too, if you look close enough, and it's something that I glossed over for a long time, but as many of the CrossFit Games athletes or coaches, in my early days, it was all about like, getting the right position on your handstand walk, how to hold the rings on a strict, ring muscle up, snatch technique and all of that. And that's where I cut my teeth the first 7 or 8 years of CrossFit, just really into those technical skills. And then I've gotten a little more into the soft skills as I've gotten a little bit older. And it's what you're seeing with all of these coaches. I'll refer back to like Ben Bergeron oftentimes, where, everything he talks about is like mindset things, mind-body things. And the reason being is why we tend to get into that, because as you zoom out and you see athletes and just general population cycle through, all those skills are important, and it's something that needs to be, that sword needs to be sharpened, and we need to be technically sound and good in that area. But what we see that is even more impactful is, people feeling good, wanting to come in and train, all these things that happen outside of the gym that keep people doing it and wanting to stay healthy and staying in shape. And so it's not like I'm going to do CrossFit for 6 months and it's like this temporary little journey, and then they just stop working out. Like, all this stuff is important to sustain a lifestyle that is again, it sounds woo-woo, but vibrating up here instead of down here,
Yeah.
And that's why we're talking about this. And it's, it's kind of a hard thing for me to talk about still to this day, because it's like, you start
Proves to me that this works.
Yeah, well, you start to talk to people about it, and they give you a little bit of a side eye, or like, okay, like, what does this look like? And it's not necessarily like, hey, if you sprained your ankle, or you have a bit of a chronic knee injury, if you do this 3 times, it's not going to necessarily feel better.
There's
like
a
if
lot
you
of
took
work
shot.
that you have to do yourself. It's even with the passive sort of emotion code therapy, you have to process it. You have to work through it. There's things for you to always work on. And I wanted to bring up one more point, and then maybe I'll kind of get to like okay, here's something practical that you could apply in your life. But something that I really see, and I feel like it's important to address, especially as you're getting to late 20s, 30s, 40s, a lot of what I feel like we need to make peace with is maybe our life is different than we had imagined when we're young, but we're here as like, I don't know, 10, 12, 16-year-olds thinking, well, I might have 4 kids and I might do this and I might do that. And I think it's almost making peace with maybe that's not really what you wanted. That's maybe what you felt like everybody else wanted you to want. And that doesn't feel right, and making peace with doing something a little alternative. And I want to bring attention to that, because I feel like it will speak to many people, whether it's women choosing not to have children, whether it's choosing not to get married, whether it's choosing a different career path that isn't super, normal. I mean, we did that. Our parents were very open with us, but I think that's very rare. We're like, hey, go out and, do whatever. I mean, my mom was like, I don't know how you're going to make a living, but you seemed happy. And then that was just, I feel very lucky that that was more important in my house than being financially secure, which I do think that's important now too. But I think happiness is always number one. So I feel like, it's a lot of addressing just, hey, my life's a little different, and maybe this is what I've always wanted. But to have a place to start, I am really passionate on, first of all, educating yourself. So reading these books, and we'll try to list these on the newsletter, so you can have some resources. Watching the documentary, but then starting a daily practice. I feel like that is key, a daily meditation practice. And this doesn't mean, there's all forms of meditation, but in my mind, it needs to be the more traditional sense that you are laying down, all distractions away, Beats headphones on or noise counseling headphones on, eye mask on, total sensory deprivation, and letting your mind go to where it needs to go. If that you can't make that happen one day, then maybe it's 5 minutes of intensive breath work. And there's all different breathing patterns that you can utilize. YouTube's got some great ones. I would pick 2 different breath patterns to work on, but a daily practice of this and starting to be more mindful. And then again, this is if you're new, then after about 3 or 4 weeks of that, then you might look into seeing a practitioner. But I think you really need to be open and feeling it yourself to really get the full value of paying someone else to help you. Because if you're not open, you're probably just going to be like, oh, I didn't feel anything. I didn't see anything. But, that's your job and your responsibility to be open.
Yeah. No, I think that's awesome. And that's a great place to leave it, where it leaves everyone with, hey, here's something that if you're listening to this and it's kind of intriguing to you, give that a shot and then see how you feel after a month and really focus on being consistent and doing it. And, there's journaling practices that can be added to it and, seeing people. But I think this is, it's kind of like the next frontier of medicine, and it's harder to sell. I think it's you're not gonna see it pushed as much as
because you've got to do the work. It's not just a pill you take and things happen in your body, but literally, I have a client who has high cholesterol every time he gets away from his meditation and journal practice, and he really doesn't change anything with his food. Yeah. And I've been working with him for 15 years plus, and it's really that to me just blows my mind. It's so cool. Or an older client that he checks his HRV and I could not get him to meditate for like the life of me until it was like his second time back with me. He's like, okay, every time I meditate, my HRV raises 20 points. And at his age, he's 62 or 63, that is so important to him. He sees that as longevity, and it absolutely is. Yeah. So this is everything. And this is a lot of what we're talking about. This daily practice is free. And if it's not even with a practitioner, we're talking about something like bi-weekly that will be covered under like an HSA or FSA. I always use our HSA. But it is much less expensive than and much better for your body. It's natural. You're not getting on. We're not trying to numb. We're trying to work through it.
Yep. All right. I think that's a good place to put a fork in it. Next week, I have a fun guest coming on, so stay tuned for that one as well. We'll see you then.